Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't feel I need to give an overview of the organization in any way because you have been many of you have been members since we started in Europe. And I will do a little bit of a timeline starting in 2017. Really 2016 is when we really started discussing an expansion to Europe. But the goal today is really to give an overview of some of our bigger strategic work, also an update to our membership benefits, and then also to cover a conversation and a discussion around how we can continue to build momentum and the kind of support that our EU members feel that they need moving forward. So to kind of build a bit of a roadmap moving forward. So you can see here the companies from Europe that are still members of the organization. We've actually grown in Europe over the last 2 years as well. You can see the logos here as well as some of the smaller members on the right. But we have sustained our membership, our early membership growth in Europe and continue to grow that. Since we launched in Europe in 2018, we've just about doubled in size as an organization. So you can see the logos here of the more than 130 companies now that we're serving. And that is expanded primarily in the United States. We do have about 17 EU members, and then a few additional. We have an Australian member and a couple of Asian members as well in different areas of Asia. But still primarily based here in the US. So what I wanted to show today is, when we launched in Europe, we were primarily just focused on individual member benefits and improving each member's sustainability journey. But we've expanded to really start looking at industry impacts. And I'll talk a little bit about our focus in those areas. So the first way that is still kind of the bread and butter and the heart and soul of the organization to create change and impact is to incentivize and support community improvement through membership benefits. So those are the list of benefits that each member receives as part of their membership, primarily measuring their impact, improving their impact, and then celebrating their journey through our accreditation program. And what we've really added on in the last couple of years is an opportunity to address large-scale environmental issues that are too big for a single company to solve on their own. And so as we've grown, we now serve 130 companies. We have the diversity and representation from all throughout the supply chain that really gives us this new opportunity to think about what are the opportunities for us to collaboratively shift the whole system of the industry to drive positive impact. So I want to touch on one of the improvements and the new pieces that come as part of membership. And so again, kind of going back to the measure, improve, and celebrate model for each member's year. And what I want to focus on today is our new measurement tool, which is the Sustainable SDG Action Manager based on the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, you both might already know about this, but in case you don't, we have been talking a lot about this through our social media channels and through direct mail. And as European companies, I'm sure you're very familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals built by the United Nations as that blueprint for achieving global prosperity. Now, these are meant to be achieved by 2030. So that means we have 10 years to work toward and use this roadmap to achieve the future that we all want. So there's 17 total SDGs, and we have switched our quick impact assessment over to the SDG Action Manager. Oh, hold on, I want to make sure we don't have someone in our waiting room. Okay, we're good. And it is now live and ready and up and running. So for those companies who have already taken an assessment from PSC, so for example, the quick impact assessment in the past, we have a manual that helps you transfer over the responses that you've had over the last several years so that we can continue to track improvement. For those companies that are joining us for the first time or taking our assessment for the first time, there's another manual that makes sure that we have access to that information so that we can help track progress and also help identify and build that roadmap for improvement. So over on the right here, you see one of the tools that we just launched last week, thanks to our project management team. And so the SDG Action Manager manual is only about 5 steps to really just outline that process and make it really simple and easy for our members to update their assessment and help them really align their sustainability program to the SDGs. So I want to pause for a second and see if any of you or any of the three of you have any questions about the SDG Action Manager or our switch over to this platform.
Nope, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. And have any of you had the opportunity to complete the SDG Action Manager yet?
I think ours update is coming up in June.
Okay.
Yes, and AB7 America has completed theirs.
All right.
So huge shout out to Madeline.
Yeah,
And
great.
for me, for Takigawa, the challenge was more to connect with the previous version. So when I connect to SDG, I had the feeling they are re-asking me the same questions from the previous, say, information.
Mm-hmm.
And the previous one was not done by me, but by one of my colleagues out of the US. So this is a little bit, I'm not sure how to transfer to make the same answers or add new information. So this is what I'm a little bit struggling.
Mark, thank you so much for sharing that. And I would encourage you to reach out to Anne. If you haven't met Anne yet, Anne, would you like to unmute yourself and say hello?
Hi, Mark. I am happy to help you. And why don't we just follow up after this and we can walk through the next steps for you, but so that you can pull the previous.
I had the explanation about the SDG, and normally it was like, oh, you click and you select one of the two big main subjects, and in 3 clicks you are done. And the first thing it asked me like many questions that sounded to me like the previous version. So probably the link was not made because my colleague was in the US, had a different connection password or something like this. So I think it's more IT related, so that we add new information and updates and not redo the past again.
Right.
If you can have a look on that, that would be good support.
Excellent. Well, I will follow up with you after this call and we can troubleshoot.
Okay, great.
All right. So the other thing I wanted to share is that as we've grown as an organization and existed now for 7 years, we have the ability to look at the aggregate data and the aggregate impact of all of our member companies working together to improve their impact over time. And so we're continuing to create case studies. We have 3 lined up for release this year. But one of the exciting pieces that we put together for our big Earth Day celebration this year are some statistics around the improvement and the comparison between our member companies and business as usual. So I just wanted to show a couple of these quickly here. One is our recycling rate versus the average business, and then also the improvement in use of renewable energy sources in our membership group between 2016 and 2019. So it's really incredible to see that impact happening. Sometimes in the nonprofit sector, our visions are difficult to measure through quantifiable metrics. And so it feels like such a privilege to be able to have numbers, because we are built on an assessment tool that gives quantifiable data, to really be able to show how each company is really changing the course of business for good. And so some exciting data coming out of that aggregate work as well. So the bulk of what I really wanted to talk about today is about our systemic change and how we're focusing on really big key environmental issues for the pet industry. So I talked about membership benefits, but this is really our industry transformation work. And so we're pioneering 2 key issues. The first is sustainable proteins, and the second is sustainable packaging. Now, why are we focusing on these 2 key issues? So when it comes to proteins, at least here in the US, pets consume about 1/4 of all the proteins raised in the United States. So the impact and the opportunity is really large. And proteins are also the highest impact ingredient in pet food, which we learned through our case study with Yosera based in Germany. When we look at sustainable packaging, we know that there's estimated to be more plastic than fish in the ocean by 2050, and that currently about 99% of pet food and treat packaging is not recyclable. And so we feel like those are 2 key issues that really do require collaboration, because we need to go into the systems of the pet industry and encourage participation from all stakeholders in order to really create that transformation. So I wanted to talk about proteins first. And in 2020, we're really setting the foundation by using this 4-factor model that will really help to start defining what a sustainable ingredient, particularly in this case, proteins, how you would evaluate or define what that means. And so we know that there are 4 key factors that impact any ingredient's sustainability performance. The first is environmental impact. The second is social impact. The third is nutrition. And the fourth is animal welfare. Now, last year, we attempted to evaluate with the University of Iowa both the environmental impact and the social impact of proteins, common proteins used in pet foods. We came into a little bit of a roadblock with that, the environmental impact and the nutrition impact. We had a little bit of a hurdle or a barrier when we came to the nutritional evaluation. And so we are relaunching that work this year with the University of Guelph. So I'll talk a little bit about how we're doing this moving forward. But we know we need to define it, so we're still working on a reevaluation of the common proteins used in pet food to change the definition of nutrition to include bioavailability and digestibility, again, partnering with a university that's very strong in veterinary sciences and nutrition sciences, because we're not nutrition experts either. We're then looking at a supply chain map of chicken suppliers and the current performance of primary suppliers here in the US. We're then evaluating common protein types in all 4 key factor areas, which we just covered. And then we have launched partnerships, first of all, continued a partnership with Pets International and launched a new partnership with Watt Global Media or Pet Food Forum in order to expand awareness and education on the work that we're doing around sustainable proteins.
Okay,
so, yes.
I had one question,
Sure.
because I discussed that with one customer recently. When we take the example like you have here on the screen with the chicken, on a pet food bag, you would put chicken and you would show a picture of the nice chicken breast and say there is real chicken in your pet food. But actually, most of the people are using the parts that are not, I mean, it's human grade basically, but the part of the chicken that are not used for human food, meaning it's waste. So how do you measure basically the part of the chicken that is recycling of the human food waste and not as a percentage of protein? Because we had that debate with this partner, and it would be quite interesting to see if pet food is the recycling chain basically of the human food, or if we say, like you put here, bioavailability and digestibility, the whole analysis is very different depending on which base you start from.
Sure. Yeah. Great question, Mark. And we looked at the top 10 most used chicken ingredients. And so you're right, that doesn't primarily include chicken breast or prime cut meat. So we looked at the types of chicken that are actually primarily used in pet foods. So that might include a chicken meal, it might include organ meat, it might include byproduct meal. And so we are looking at the top 10 used in pet food, not in human food. And you're correct on the nutritional evaluation, but when you look at the environmental evaluation, when you do a full life cycle analysis, you do take into consideration the end of life cycle and what other uses that meat would go to. So if it's meat that's not used for other supply chains, and therefore it's reusing waste, then that is accounted for in the life cycle analysis when you do the environmental assessment. So we have included that in our environmental analysis results. Almost all of the what's not intended for human consumption does result in a lower environmental impact than a prime cut meat that would be used in the human food supply system.
Okay, so it's taken into account. It would be interesting for how you, just for my understanding, to have this I would say explanation. That would be interesting.
Yeah, so the report that we will release related to this will come in the fall this year, and it will outline the methodology that was used for each assessment in those 4 key factor areas, and give lots of background information. But we recognize that education is really needed in this industry, both for manufacturers and suppliers and brands. And so we recognize that education is the first step when we're starting to talk about this issue. So thank you for bringing up that question. And I hope, and we can reconnect in the future as we're starting to release information on this, that it's very clear what the methodology was.
Perfect.
Any other questions from AB7 or Moderna before I move on? Okay. So we already did a Q&A on that. So the next thing I want to talk about is sustainable packaging leadership. And again, looking at kind of 4 key areas. So focusing on tools, which we're already doing, which is allowing life cycle analysis for every member company of different packaging scenarios. And that includes primary and secondary packaging, as well as transportation of that packaging. So that helps companies make decisions that have lower environmental impact and be able to communicate those benefits as they start to make those changes. We are focusing on a take-back program, which is called Flex Forward. It's a pilot that will inform our national expansion. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We are hopeful to be able to release a packaging award of what companies are making the most progress toward more sustainable packaging. And then also a packaging expo. So for the first time in the pet industry, coupled with our Impact Unleashed event, connecting suppliers and brands around the key packaging innovations that we feel are the best pathway for improvement for sustainable packaging. So those are the 4 key areas that we're focusing on. Flex Forward is our pilot program that so many people are very excited about when it comes to our packaging work. We are piloting this with 300 independent retailers in the Pacific Northwest of the US. We are, our goal is to collect 5,000 pounds of packaging and then to recycle that product and to test the remanufacturing of new products from the recycled resin material and pellets. So this will launch. Right now we have pushed it back because we need to model what collections might look like in an average year as we're moving forward. And so we're hopeful by the end of Memorial Day, which is at the end of May, to be launching this. The way it works is that pet retailers have an activation kit, so they get everything that they need to participate at 0 cost, and they encourage their customers to bring any type of flexible packaging back. It's brand agnostic, so any brand can participate. We have a distributor partner, which is PFX, the Pet Food Experts, and they pick up all of those materials from the retailers, and they help us calculate the quantities that are created, and then they'll also help us determine if additional cleaning or what other issues we may have with collections. We then send that to a recycler, so our recycling partner has already piloted and tested the regrind of that material successfully. And then we're also partnering with Westpot and Moderna to test to see whether or not those pellets can be used to create new product and to fully close the circle. All of those products will be donated this year, but with the national expansion, it may provide additional financial sustainability for this system. And sorry, I should have started with the pet parents because the pet parents are critical in actually bringing back the packaging to those pet retailers. Now, one of the reasons this has been able to move forward is that there was a very generous donation from Earth Animal as the single brand sponsor to really afford this program to move forward. And we've also collaborated with our pet product manufacturers and our distributor partner to be able to launch this in hopes that it will inform a national expansion soon. So I'm going to pause for a minute, and I know there may be additional questions about this. Chantel, I think you saw a bit of this at Global Pet, so you've probably asked most of your questions, but I thought I would just pause for a minute and see if there's any additional questions.
Yes, it's Mark from Takigawa. As we are making packaging, I think that there is one interesting information that I don't understand in your process. Mm-hmm. Today you are collecting, like you said, 99% of the packaging, which is mm-hmm. considered but by most recycling companies as not recyclable. because it's a mix of polyester and PE pouch, and sometimes you get some kind of sheet of paper in the middle of that. And on the other hand, most of the flexible packaging people are now working towards monomaterial. Most probably PE will be the future, to be easier to recycle. But of course, it's a challenge. So I find it very interesting if you find some solution to make, I don't know, pieces of, I call plastic wood just because I see your screen now, out of the pellets basically, and you make a dog niche, for example, or benches for the people who walk their dogs. If it can be made with today's bags, then we should find a solution to basically, should we develop the monomaterial that is easier to recycle, or is there basically no need if today's bag can be recycled, even if they are not considered as recyclable, because most of the countries are energy recovering the bags, which is not the best way to keep the value basically of the plastic, but at least it's worth something. And in France, at least, the biggest challenge is more than collecting and recycling is exactly what you've been working on, to create some application downstream, basically collecting, sorting, and making new recycled kibbles. I mean, how to say, pellets of that plastic, is feasible technically. The question is today, especially now with the oil price going down, it costs more to have used plastic rather than fresh new plastic. And if you don't have a use for it, you can collect them, make pellets, but nobody will buy them. And then you cannot close the loop, basically.
Yeah, sure. So great question. So this program is really aimed at the 99% that are not currently made out of that recyclable resin, which is one resin instead of potentially 3 to 5 different resins sandwiched together. Yes. Last year, our primary push, and continues to be in our #1 download in our toolkit, we really are helping the industry see that recyclable resin is the preference, because what it does is, it increases the value of those bags dramatically to the recycling system at large. And so that's really the large scale movement that we're recommending that companies, as they're designing, are really designing for recyclability. Now, we have had to identify a specific recycling partner, and we're having to ship all of this material from one side of the country to the other side of the country, because it is very rare to find a recycler that can take this type of packaging, because it is so low value, and it's at high cost. And you have to have a large brand sponsor to come in and basically make this financially sustainable for the industry as well. So in the large scale, we want to start to shift that 99% number to much smaller, so that there are these resins and pellets are high value and can go directly into the plastics market to be reused. So this program is really just focused on a short-term solution for so much of the packaging that today is going into the landfill.
Okay, well, if I understand it right, you are starting the program with the bags that are today on the market, like you said, at high cost because of transportation. But over time, basically, if I take France where I live, is as soon as more recyclers have the ability to recycle it, and at the same time, there will be more of those recycling plastic, not only for pet food, but more globally available, it will then become a generic recycling process like we have today with glass, but say that's mono-material PE, and then basically it will go out of the R&D push that you are giving, going back into the normal recycling, because then you have more volume, and it's more like supporting a transition to launch basically the possibilities what you are doing now.
Yes, exactly. So we need the collection infrastructure regardless of what types of bags we're collecting. So it's a dual push. Here in the US, we actually have collection systems for monomer for the, it's a store drop-off program in many of the largest stores here in the US. So Target and Best Buy and Walmart are all able to have these in-store collection bins for that mono resin. But right now, the pet food bags cannot be accepted into that. So as we move over to that recyclable monomer, it will be massively much more accepted, at least here in the US, in big drop-off areas that recyclers are already servicing. And so there is a system for that. And so ours really is a bridge strategy for what's in the market today as we start to transition over.
Okay, now that's making sense. You're right that most retailers, they are collecting the cardboard and the stretch film that is around the pallets, for example. They're already collected, and because it will be the same as material as the stretch sleeve, then they can add basically the recyclable monomaterial film to their normal palletization waste. Okay, no, that's very clear. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to shift the conversation now to a discussion around EU engagement. So I wanted to go, first of all, give some transparency into the investments that PSC and our members have made into these two big programs, but also just talk about the history of our European engagement and open a discussion around how we might improve momentum and engagement moving forward. So maybe I'll start just with a little bit of understanding of how we're funding these two key areas. So for our packaging program, last year we completed a recycling feasibility study, which was about $30,000, and we had a single company sponsor that work. And this year, our recycling pilot is about $100,000 investment, and we have yet another single company sponsor for that work. So that's really what's been fueling our ability to take on these big projects. On the program, or on the protein side, we ran a collaborative donation campaign with our members and raised $50,000 to complete initial research last year. And we've increased that to $70,000 this year for our 2020 research. And that's a combination of a donation campaign, again, where multiple companies are providing an investment, but also in-kind services from several of our research universities to participate in this work. So I think that's a key element to understanding how we're doing this work. And I think if Europe is interested in modeling, for example, a supply chain system in Europe or the recycling system and doing a feasibility study for what a pilot might look like in Europe, we may expect similar pricing and would need similar funding models in order to be able to expand this work so that it can be relevant for the EU recycling market and the supply chains of Europe as well. So with that in mind, I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview. I apologize, this sentence is not completed. But in 2017, we recognized that there was an intent to expand and an interest from European companies to join the organization and start using our tools and resources. We started to work on case studies with some companies to launch membership in 2018. And in 2018, Pets International ran a matching fund campaign that was able to raise about $15,000 for PSC, which they decided to allocate to our accreditation program, which we took to Zoomark last year in 2019. So also in 2018, the European members decided against a founding members model, which would have raised funds to have a very specific program director that was meant to serve our European members and really understand the dynamics in the market there. We did release the Yosera and Protix case study in 2018. We also launched an EU advisory group. And Mark, you were very participant in this, but we felt that participation slowed very quickly when we launched that. And we also had some hesitancy from both ZZF and Bologna Fier to partner with PSC. So in 2019, when we took the accreditation program to Zoomark, we had around 5 companies participate in that. Moderna hosted a booth event where they announced their own SDG focus and also promoted the benefits of PSC membership. We had some improvement in our participation and interest in partnership from ZZF. And I think importantly to note is that our EU members have shown continuous improvement on their performance assessment. And so they're continuing to take action and show improvement, though engagement tends to be a little bit lower than we feel sometimes with our US members, as we're here based locally and interacting with them at our trade shows more regularly as well.